You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Well, breathe. Tuesday, November 6th is the big day. Of course, people have begun early voting all across this country, but November 6th is the midterm day of elections. Breathe Lamaze style. Deep breaths, deep calming breaths, and then little pants, as we try to deliver democracy back to this wounded country. Fittingly, my guest today is Rebecca Traister, who has written a stunning book on the historical necessity for and impact of women's anger, and how that's been buried away from us, so we don't know how much history and progressive change needs our anger. That's coming up, and also a surprise, a sort of thought experiment, I could call it, in fighting words at the end of the program. So, let's get started. Breathe, pant, pant, breathe, breathe. And let's get started by going inside the headlines. The world learned about the pipe bombs mailed to Trump's targeted enemies, both individuals and the press. Although fortunately no one was hurt or killed, the story did make major news because most of the recipients aimed at were famous. Then came the actual murders of Jews assembled for Sabbath ceremonies at their synagogue in Pittsburgh. It too made the news because it was openly a hate crime. The perpetrator repeatedly stated, "I've come to kill all Jews must die." But also because it reportedly is the single largest historic anti-Semitic lethal incident in this country's history. Then there was Louisville, Kentucky, which barely got reported at all. That's when and where, on October 24th, a self-termed white supremacist man tried but failed to get into the First Baptist Church, where 70 people were at a service, but he couldn't enter because the doors were locked. So instead, he went nearby to a grocery store where he shot and killed Vicki Lee Jones, age 67, and then, outside in the parking lot, shot and killed Maurice Stallard, 69, while Stallard's grandchild watched and screamed. Ms. Jones, a classic black Southern lady of her generation, was a pillar in her church, beloved in her community and by her children and grandchildren. Retired, she'd worked much of her life at the VA hospital. Stallard, a military vet, was also retired after years at the GE factory. His daughter, Kelly Watson, has served at City Hall as the mayor's chief equity officer. Two upright, elderly African Americans, slain in cold blood for being black. Neither one famous. Nor was it a historic first that hasn't happened thousands of times before in this country. So it made no headlines. The Department of Interior is asking for permission to destroy records about oil and gas leases, mining, dams, wells, timber sales, marine conservation, fishing, endangered species, critical habitats, land acquisition, and more. Basically, records are being threatened from every agency in the Interior Department, including the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Geological Survey, Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and others. Now, normally all this data would go to the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, N-A-R-A, for collection and preservation. But the Trump administration is simply destroying records so they'll never be accessible. The good bureaucrats, at least those in the National Park Service, I hope in the other agencies as well, had been secretly squirreling away copies of data for months in fear that precisely something like this would happen, and they were called paranoid. So please write your representative and senators to express outrage at this erasure of history and destruction of records that will be extremely important, particularly in an era of increasing endangerment to land and life. For that matter, you'd be protecting yourself as well. Every minute, people around the world purchase 1 million plastic bottles and 2 million plastic bags. It will take more than 1,000 years for most of these items to degrade, but many break apart into tiny shards known as microplastics, trillions of which have shown up in seawater, tap water, and even table salt. Now we can add one more destination, the human gut. A pilot study showed microplastics in stool samples of people from Finland, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, Poland, Russia, Britain, and Austria. Even the researchers were astonished because every sample tested positive. Researchers hope to complete a broader study. Meanwhile, it's likely the plastics are in you and me. Abroad, it's not a whole lot more encouraging. Angela Merkel has announced she will step down when her term as Chancellor of Germany ends in 2021, although it might happen sooner if elections are called earlier. It's alarming news because the ultra-right is on the rise in Germany, and Merkel has stood firmly in its way. Never a vocal feminist, she's been nonetheless a woman who never tried to hide being female and mentored other women. Trained as a scientist in East Germany and the first woman to serve as German Chancellor, she stood up to both Trump and Putin and insisted that, especially given Germany's acknowledged past, that country must open its doors wide to refugees. She has been a woman of real power, calm, reasonable, intelligent, sane. Even those who never liked her will miss her keenly. Over in Brazil, it's a living hell. Jair Bolsonaro was elected to the presidency after a terrifying campaign in which he openly declared that he was in favor of dictatorships and of torture. Quote, "Elections won't change anything in this country. It will only change when we break out in civil war here and do what the military regime didn't do, killing 30,000 people. If some innocent people die, that's fine." Close quote. He promised to imprison or exile his political opponents and said that, quote, "The Congress is useless. Let's dissolve it and do the coup already. Let's go straight to the dictatorship." Close quote. On race, in what was previously proudly one of the most diverse countries in the world, he said, quote, "Even the lightest Afro-descendant doesn't do anything. They're not even good for procreation." Close quote. In 2013, he said he would rather have a son who is an addict than one who is gay. He told a woman legislator, "I would not rape you because you are not worthy of it." He campaigned saying, quote, "Because women get more labor rights than men, meaning they get maternity leave, the employer prefers to hire men. I would not employ women equally." And he also described fathering a female child as a weakness. As for indigenous populations who have specially reserved lands along the Amazon River, he said, quote, our Amazon is like a child with chickenpox. Every dot you see is an indigenous reservation. We are going to fuse the Ministry of Agriculture with the Ministry of the Environment and put a stop to the demarcation of indigenous land." You will not be surprised, perhaps, to learn that the first call of admiring congratulations he received was from Donald Trump. But I did manage, damn it, to find 2 good news items to end inside the headlines with. After Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed filled half of his new cabinet with women in a radical overhaul, the country's parliament took another step forward by appointing the country's first female president. Sahle Work Zewde, 68, a seasoned diplomat who has held high UN positions, accepted the presidency following the unprecedented appointments of women to lead the Defense Ministry and the Secret Intelligence Ministry, now called the Ministry of Peace. Although the position of president is considered largely ceremonial, nevertheless she is now Africa's only female head of state, and she's been active in ending 2 decades of hostilities with Eritrea. She says, quote, "I am a product of people who fought for equality and political freedom in this country," adding, "And if you thought I spoke a lot about women before, know that I am just getting started," close quote. And the other fragment of good news? Well, in Stephen Hawking's last scientific paper, just published posthumously, he thought he may have found a way back from being swallowed by a black hole. There's hope for us yet, America. We have to take a break now, but coming up is Rebecca Traister on women's anger and the historical impact of that anger. And before then, when we come back next segment, we're going to go through some surrealism corners. Stick with us. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back, and let's lurch into the surrealism corner. In case you were concerned that with all the campaigning Trump is doing, albeit from the comfort of Air Force One, still sometimes as many as 3 rallies in a single day, not to speak of going where they really don't want him, like Pittsburgh, while the city is still burying its dead Jewish citizens who were shot with an automatic rifle by one of Trump's hate clones. In case you were concerned that all this travel might be too much strain on his health, particularly since he's now embarked on destroying the Constitution itself by attacking birthrights as guaranteed by it, well, you'll be so comforted by this news. According to schedules obtained by Politico, last week Trump had 3 times as much planned free time as he had planned work time, a ratio that isn't unusual for him at all. Much of that freedom is described in his schedules as executive time, a euphemism for the unstructured time Trump spends tweeting, phoning friends, and watching television. Speaking of TV, there I was, my feminist hope springing eternal, thinking that maybe, just maybe, given the way Megyn Kelly had spoken out on sexual harassment, even to Trump's face, and then come forth on the #MeToo front, she might actually have put 1 and 1, like sexism and racism, together and have come up with 2, as in too obvious to be overlooked and too noxious to be tolerated, and that it would be too surreal to contemplate her ever making the same offhand, stupid, racist remarks she had made when at Fox News. After all, thought I, it was Fox News, for God's sake, and maybe she spoke that way to keep her job, which might explain it but never justify such behavior. Well, then she went and stepped in it again, this time on NBC. Then she apologized for saying that she hadn't realized that it was wrong to say that she thought there was nothing wrong with wearing blackface as a Halloween costume for kids. The apology made it clear she still did not get it. Fortunately, her ratings at NBC were low, thus making it easier for the suits in the corner office to dump her after this last offensive remark. That's when we learned that she had been paid $17 million a year by NBC. What were they thinking? Here's a strange, tragic item that warrants being in the surrealism corner, even though there's nothing funny ha-ha about it, only funny really weird. Last week, under a small pier that juts out from Riverside Park at 68th Street in Manhattan, a passerby saw two bodies. Police came, discovered the bodies of two young women bound together by duct tape at their wrists and waists and ankles. They wore similar black leggings and black jackets with fur trim, and their bodies bore no obvious signs of trauma. By Friday, detectives had learned that the women were sisters from Saudi Arabia who had lived in Fairfax, Virginia. Rotana Faria was 22, Tala Faria only 16. The police are reportedly investigating the possibility that the sisters may have carried out a suicide pact, taping themselves together and throwing themselves in the river. But detectives have not yet ruled out murder, you think? And the medical examiner's office has not yet determined the cause of death. No one has claimed the bodies. The Arab News, an English paper in Saudi Arabia, reported that Rotana had been living in New York, while her mother and younger sister remained in Virginia. The mother had reported Tala missing 2 months ago, but then called off the search when she learned the girl was visiting her older sister. The sisters had been in contact with their mother until about a week ago, but as it turns out, the mother also reported her daughters as missing last year. And back then, when police located the sisters, the young women asked for protection and were placed in a shelter. The mother had recently received a call from the Saudi embassy in D.C. informing her that her daughters had applied for asylum, police said. Now, I'm not playing Dorothy Sayers to solve this, but it is more than surreal to think that an efficient way of committing suicide is to tape yourself to someone else and somehow fling yourselves into the Hudson River. But it is deplorably realistic to think that they were murdered. It could have been done by Saudi operatives who we now know function lethally outside of the kingdom and who have in the past, in concert with male relatives of such rebellious young women who are studying here in the States, threatened to kill or abduct the women, and in fact have abducted them. The fact that the mother has not claimed their bodies broadly proclaims that this well may be the case, because burying the dead is a major religious duty in Islam, and the only thing that would stop her is fearing she doesn't want to get into trouble with the Saudi authorities or someone in the family itself committed the crime. It would be perceived as that the girls had betrayed the kingdom and the family by seeking asylum in the States, and it was then necessary to reclaim family honor with murder. I've personally witnessed the kind of intense family pressure put on such young women escapees from the kingdom, the heartstrings that are pulled on by the mothers, the vows of go home, and I promise you'll be safe, no one will punish you, and the threats, meanwhile, of murder by the brothers and fathers. We're going to stay on this story, and I sure hope the New York cops don't settle on the duct tape suicide story, which is about as ludicrous as if they'd claimed Khashoggi had chopped himself into pieces and hidden them so the Saudis couldn't find them. Here, however, is an item that actually is funny, if you have a slightly bitter, edgy sense of humor, which you have to develop as a feminist to stay alive. Tokyo Medical University has just admitted responsibility for what's been termed the loss of a generation of brilliant women. Women's scores for admission to medical school were arbitrarily reduced by 20% for at least 7 years. 81 other Japanese medical schools have now been asked to submit their admission data for inspection as a result of the emerging scandal. WTF! They just went and reduced women's scores by 20% and kept doing so for at least 7 years. Nothing arbitrary about it. It seems pretty obvious to me what they were after. Here's some bad news, good news. The Kepler Space Telescope is finished. The NASA craft discovered 2,681 planets since it was launched in 2009, along with many more promising outer space blips. But Kepler ran out of fuel. It will be missed. However, good news. NASA broke a world record recently, deploying an 180-pound parachute in just 0.4 seconds, or at twice the speed of sound. The parachute's going to be used in a Mars mission in 2020. Bless their NASA hearts and brains. You can't stop scientists from doing science. And one last bitlet. We have another word from a different language. This week it's from the German, Fernweh, spelled F-E-R-N-W-E-H, Fernweh, which charmingly means feeling homesick for a place you've never been. These days, principled Americans seeking relief from what their country is becoming are experiencing Fernweh, someplace else, someplace better, even if we've never been there. Then again, we can seize the day and take back our country. We can vote. That is not surreal. We've got to take another brief pause now. Are you angry? Well, of course you're angry. You're an intelligent person. And who wouldn't be angry these days? It would be unhealthy not to be angry, despite the fact that women are told nonstop from birth, don't be angry. It's so unattractive to be angry. But we're going to discuss not only anger, but that history depends and is waiting for and needs women's anger, or else there won't be any more history. So don't go away. We'll be right back. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. Rebecca Traister is an award-winning American author. She's currently a writer-at-large for New York Magazine and The Cut, and a contributing editor at Elle Magazine. She also appears quite frequently on cable TV news, commenting on feminism and politics. Her first book, Big Girls Don't Cry, in 2010, was a New York Times Notable Book of the Year. Her second book, All the Single Ladies, came out in 2016, and her new book, published just recently, is called Good and Mad, The Revolutionary Power of Women's Anger, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. Rebecca Traister. Rebecca, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Robin.
Oh, it's good to have you back, and to be riding in on the triumph of good and mad, like a broom. It's
Right.
It's the subtitle is The Revolutionary Power of Women's Anger. It's the new book. It's already a bestseller. And I'm so glad that you wrote it. I am just, God, we needed this. Soraya Chamali was on the program recently, and her book, Rage Becomes Her. And it occurred to me that they're the perfect pillars for a female Samson to bring down the temple of patriarchy, because hers is hers is very of sort of the personal journey of individual women, and yours is this epic placing of women's anger in the political consciousness, and that in fact it has been behind every major social progressive change. So I congratulate.
I would add to that. Thank you so much. And yes, I think Soraya's book is so remarkable, and it really fleshes out something that I was not able to do in my book, which is the psychology and the messages sent individually and personally to women about why they should suppress and not express their rage, not even feel their rage. Mine deals with political consequence. And then I would say that the third that I cannot recommend highly enough is Brittany Cooper's Eloquent Rage, published in February, and is incandescently good.
Yes, it is.
And that is about Black feminist rage, and Brittany Cooper herself, a gender studies professor at Rutgers, finding her Black feminist rage and using it as a superpower, and it is an extraordinary book.
Yes, she is an extraordinary writer. She's done the program, and she's something capital E else. Well, let's talk about Good and Mad. I know you've been on a book tour, and I would stake my life on the fact that women are bursting into tears of happiness and recognition and fury and rage, and coming up to you. What is the reaction generally been? Men are shuffling their feet and studying their toes?
It's interesting, actually. You know, there have been more men than I expected at my readings. Yes, I've been on a book tour. It's been about 4 weeks, and I've been on the West Coast and a lot in the Midwest. And on the East Coast. I'm just heading south in coming days. And I've been really, being on this tour has been remarkable. It's also been such a frantic and anxious and fearful and furious time.
Yeah.
The book was published just a few days after Christine Blasey Ford's testimony.
Right.
And of course, you know, in the weeks moving up to the midterms, you know, the weeks in which just within the past few days, there's been the horrible mass shooting at the synagogue.
Yeah.
The shooting at the Kroger supermarket by a white supremacist who tried to get into a Black church.
Right. The bombings, the pipe bombings,
to members of the Democratic Party and the media.
Yeah.
You know, this is a very fraught time to be out talking to crowds who are incredibly angry, incredibly scared. Many of the people, and this is part of the dynamic that I'm writing about in this book, many Americans are new to anger, and we can talk about the reasons why this shouldn't have been, and the sort of lies that were fed to Americans of certain comfortable positions to make them believe that they didn't have anything to be angry about for a long time, and that those lies were kind of revealed to be false in the wake of the election of Donald Trump. But a lot of people are very new to this struggle and very shaken by the recognition that they might, of what the losses are going to entail and what the roadblocks are going to be. And so a lot of what I've been seeing on this book tour is a kind of eagerness to see the anger that women are feeling and that underrepresented people are feeling, put in the context both of historical social movements, political movements, and the reassurance of knowing that they're not alone in their anger.
That's right. That
they're not isolated, that they are part of a larger network of people who are feeling fury at these inequities and these injustices. People are very anxious to feel part of a coalition. They are very anxious to feel like they might be part of a movement that might have historic precedence. And so that is sort of some of the hunger that I am finding out on the road. And yes, there are tears of recognition, there are tears of, I think, connection with the other people in the audience.
Yeah.
There is a lot of fury, there are a lot of questions. What can I do? What can I do? And, you know, most worrisome for me has been, especially in the wake of the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh, I've heard from a lot of women saying that that defeat had sort of paralyzed them briefly.
Oh, God.
And of course, this is a terrible time, that, you know, the weeks before the midterm.
That's right.
To be paralyzed. That's the sort of most worrying version. But then there are tremendous stories that give me hope. You know, everywhere I go, I hear from people who are devoting their every hour to doing the work of campaigning, door knocking, you know, voter registration, and now getting out the vote in early voting states, who have been part of the teacher strikes or the fast food worker strikes, you know, who have been protesters themselves, who are getting educated about the history, not only of women's insurrections against, you know, misogyny and racism and economic inequality, but also about the ways that inequities have played out within progressive coalitions historically. There are a lot of people learning a lot about this country's history that they didn't previously know, and that's a crucial step toward forming stronger coalitions going forward. So there are a lot of reasons that being on the road has been incredibly inspiring and energizing for me, but it's also really given me a picture of the kind of hunger for, for context, really, what this moment means, how, what we can learn from our past and from each other about how to move forward.
Yeah, we'll see, even in the face of incredible voter suppression and blatant meddling, we'll see what happens at the midterms. Not that will stop us one way or the other. We'll continue.
Well, one of the things I have twin fears about the midterms, right? My biggest fear, of course, is that voter suppression will mean a bad result, and it's the one of the starkest fears I have in the current moment is the inability to feel confident about the possibility of free and fair elections moving forward, and we see it in states all around the country. The efforts being made to suppress the votes, especially of Black and brown voters.
Right.
And that we have those fears because they're legitimate. It's what's happening.
Yes.
The Supreme Court did it in gutting the Voting Rights Act. States are now doing it in a million creative ways, returning us in many ways to an era of Jim Crow. And of course, that's the mechanisms that a Kavanaugh Supreme Court. This is exactly what its aim is to reverse the progress made by earlier generations of angry protesters and mass movements. So that is my deepest fear, is that Democrats will lose and perhaps lose in ways that we can't even trust whether or not they actually lost.
Right.
But then there's an attendant fear, which is that in loss, so many of those who've been newly dedicating their lives to this fight will give up. And I hope that's not the case. I saw a wonderful example of it in Georgia. In 2017, I went and met many of the suburban white women who were newly politically active in the race working for John Ossoff in that runoff election against Karen Handel in Georgia's 6th district. And I was very worried then that in the wake of Ossoff's loss, so many of these women who had previously been kind of politically somnambulant and then had come to political consciousness in a way that they described as personally transformative. They used the language of coming out and a sort of chemical change that had come over them. They were new people. And I thought, oh no, after he loses, is this going to be over for them? Are they going to feel like their work was futile? But in fact, those women were not deterred by Ossoff's loss, and they are out there every moment right now, still working for Lucy McBath and Stacey Abrams, and that's wonderful. Yeah. But the one other thing I would say is that if Democrats win big on Election Day, I also don't want that to stop the work, because I think that there's a way in which so much of this, especially for the newly energized, is exhausting and daunting, and that we're looking for rest. And everybody needs to take rest. I'm not denying that's a crucial part of a very long fight. Right. But that the idea that if we win, we will have solved it, when of course we're just at the very beginning of what is going to be an exceedingly long and daunting fight.
A very long and daunting fight, yeah. I mean, even to just get back to where we were is a long and daunting fight, much less, forge ahead, and the clock is ticking on the planet. So it's
that is a newer element.
Yes.
I often look back at the decades and centuries that movements took, lifetimes of organizers and
we don't have
dedicated people. We actually don't have that right now, and that is truly chilling.
Yeah, when people compare this to the 60s and the 70s, I keep thinking of that. And God knows we felt a sense of great urgency. And some of us were talking about, the planet back then, even so, because scientists were already saying, this is not sustainable. But nothing like now, when we basically have a few decades in which to begin to commence to turn this around. My God, the scholarship in this is amazing. In this book, what did you do? Just give up life and spend a couple of years in the library? I know you couldn't have, because I see you on television being a terrific pundit, and I know you're doing political work and writing. But it is so solid in terms of scholarly citation. I mean, nobody in academia, even if they're trying to be very polite, will be able to get round the work that you've done here. It's brilliant.
Oh, well, that's lovely of you to say. I'm very self-conscious about even the word scholarship. As the daughter of academics, I'm very conscious of the fact that I am not one. I am not a scholar. I do not have a PhD. In fact, I learned very little history in college. I was a student of literature, and I didn't take history classes. I never took women's studies classes. I was just at my alma mater this weekend and was reminded by a woman who I'd been. She said, "No, we were in a women's studies class together freshman year, and it wasn't very good." And I thought, "Oh God, that's right." And I think it turned me off of the subject, actually.
Oh my God! Well, you've certainly caught up, Rebecca.
Well, in part, it was from writing my last book about unmarried women.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I sort of came across history that I'd never been taught, and that was a case where that book took me many years to write.
Yeah.
And a lot of those years were spent, if not in a library, in a corner of my apartment, reading the scholarship done by academics, and learning about all kinds of history that I hadn't been taught. And that history, helped inform this book, which was written much more quickly. And, I was terrified the whole time that I was getting the history wrong, that I was making mistakes. And so far, not too many of them have been pointed out to me.
You're a damn good reporter, for God's sake.
Oh, well, thank you. But it really is, I'm also acutely aware of how much history I still don't know that I'm being told about all the time, history that I wish I'd included in this book. If there's anything, I'm grateful for your appreciation of the history, because I really, really want to make this history that's not taught to so many of us more available to more people, because I think we'd find solace, but also just a better understanding of who we are and how we got here, and how we might move forward if we knew more of the history that had been kept from us.
Yeah, well, most people today, for example, don't know that in the 70s we had these terrific buttons made up that said, "God is coming and she is pissed." I mean, we had a whole lot of angry buttons that were considered going too far. In fact, one of my books I titled "Going Too Far" because it was said so often. The minute that you raised your voice, the minute that you were, quote, unreasonable, the minute that you, and that could be to the left or the right, it didn't matter, whichever man you were challenging at whichever point for taking advantage of yourself or other women or this burgeoning baby feminist politics, you were going too far. Well, not that, Robin is going too far. And I'd love to hear you talk about how to phrase this, how we prepare women for the fact that there is a price to pay for anger, and it's worth it. In other words, every woman gets the message: there's a price to pay for your anger. Don't do it. We've all been raised on that. But my point is different. It's that yes, we can't sell anger to women, and don't need to, as if it were toothpaste. It will make you happy and beautiful and give you white shining teeth. There is a price, a real price. In 1970, I wrote two pieces. One was prose piece called "Goodbye to All That," and another was a poem called "Monster." And it was a very cranky year for me, Rebecca. I was really getting pissed off, and something just broke in me. I had been, very much in the left, and I thought that this women's movement was a great idea for bringing more women into having a Marxist analysis, God help me. And fortunately, the feminist politics got to me before I got to it, and I was just incandescent with rage. So those two pieces came out, and doors shut in my face all over the place. I knew "Goodbye to All That," which named names in the male left, that I was walking through doors that would never again be open to me, and I didn't care. And with "Monster," it was a different matter because I'm a poet and was then, and so that was the pure fire burning at its whitest or bluest, the hottest color that fire burns at. But I threw up literally, repeatedly, when writing both of these at two different times in the same year. I kept vomiting and sleepless nights and crying and going back to my then typewriter and writing. And I was convinced that I was the only person crazy enough in the world to feel this way. And then women started writing in. And then they began coming to poetry readings and chanting Read Monster. So there was some kind of channeling of a collective fury that I didn't know I was getting into. And there's a kind of blissful, foolish ignorance that when you can't not do it anymore, you can't not say it, you can't not take a stand, saves you. There is a price to pay, though, and it's worth it. So how do we get that across? I mean, I think your book definitely does.
Well, there are a couple things that I would say. First of all, it's about, I think that it's worth doing some work, and I hope that the book takes a stab at this, at reframing anger, because it's always one of the ways that we're discouraged from it. And we know that we're discouraged from expressing our anger in part by a power structure that doesn't want us to challenge it loudly or aggressively, right?
Of course.
And that there's a tactical reason that that white patriarchy discourages and makes monstrous and marginalizes and makes ridiculous women's anger, which is because if we suppress it, then A, we feel crazy and isolated, like we're the only people.
Right.
And I shouldn't use the word crazy, actually, because if we suppress it, we will feel isolated and alone. And as if, as you described, as you were throwing up, writing your pieces, we're the only ones who could feel this way.
Right.
And so in part, we're sold a version of anger that is only divisive and destructive, that is about breaking bonds and confrontation. And of course, anger has those properties. I don't mean to pretend that it doesn't have destructive and divisive properties. But what we're never told about is anger's connective properties. What happens when we do give voice to that anger and it connects us to other people, we become audible to other people who share our anger, share our frustration. And then when we become audible to each other and visible to each other in our anger, then we can start talking, making connections, forming coalitions,
right.
And doing the organizing within the movements that are, we hope, designed to alter the circumstances that are making us so angry.
This is that great you too moment. Oh my God, you too? You too,
right,
yeah.
Right. And in fact, think about in Tarana Burke's original,
right.
view of Me Too, which was about, instead of holding back the story she didn't want to tell, and of course she's talking in that moment in 2006 when she founds the Me Too movement and leads it into the future, she's talking specifically about communities of color and sexual violence perpetrated, and the power of speaking and telling the stories to women and girls of color so that they know that they're not alone, and that in fact it does the work of making clear how pervasive and ubiquitous this kind of violence and harm is. Now that then in 2017 gets taken up in a slightly different way in the hashtag #MeToo movement, but that too is about the power of giving voice to the story of your life, the full story of what you've experienced and what your life has entailed,
and demanding to be visible.
Communicative bond, yes, and demanding to be seen. And think about the women, how that connects to Anna Maria Archila and Maria Gallagher in the elevator, yelling at Blake, demanding that he look at them and listen to them and not ignore them. And they actually include the meta critique. They say, look at the message you're sending to us, that if we tell our stories, you'll just ignore us and not pay attention to us, that we don't matter. But in fact, we're insisting that our voices be heard, that we're raising our voices, and that you look us in the eye when we tell you the story, that you acknowledge us as human. This is so powerful, that anger, because it calls on other people to acknowledge your right to your full humanity, right?
Yes.
Your ability to give voice to the things that enrage and frustrate you. And I think that can be liberating and joyful. And I think we need to think about anger as being a normal, healthy part of the full range of human response to the world, and especially to its inequalities, along with sadness, grief, frustration, and then joy and worry and madness, fury. This is a normal human reaction, but it's discouraged in women, and it's discouraged in people with less power, who are marginalized or subjugated. And we need to reclaim it as just a rational response, especially to injustice and inequality. The part that you're talking about in terms of preparing women for a backlash, I've done a lot of thinking about this, because having been raised myself in the anti-feminist backlash of the 1980s and 90s and felt its absolutely chilling, freezing effects, I sometimes think about my own political patterns in my life, my own predilections, and still think about gosh, for a lot of my life, have I gone for the safer option, in part because I was raised in an era in which I didn't think that full left rage was even possible, because the backlash was so chilling and so cold that I only was reaching for middle ground. I think about this a lot, the power of backlash. And during the #MeToo movement in the fall of 2017, I felt like there was a period where I was saying, watch out, the backlash is coming, doing that sort of preparatory work of this is thrilling and radical and hard and powerful, but we got to prepare because the backlash is coming and we're going to pay for this. And I was it was like a tightness. I was constantly cowering, waiting for the blow to come, right?
Oh yeah, no, that's not good, because that discourages for one thing, it doesn't recognize also the exhilaration of anger. I mean,
right.
backlash is always with us. Ho hum. What else? Patriarchy is not going nicely.
Right. And that was sort of the thing that at a certain point I was like, wait, what am I waiting for? We are living in a Trump administration. The backlash is here. We are living in the backlash. And so I do think that at the point, there's so much, as you say, that prepares women for the reality that they're going to pay for the expression of their anger, that at this point it's like, you know what? I can't prepare anybody anymore. Let's just encourage not just the expression. I don't mean this book to just be encouraging the expression of anger.
No.
I mean it to be encouraging us to listen to the anger of other women differently, with more curiosity, to receive it differently, to hear the patterns that work to marginalize or discourage it, and try to break those patterns.
And also to gain the energy of collective anger, and our anger also, just like they're after power over, we're after power too. The kind of anger that the right and the white supremacy movement and the patriarchy and the all of that is expressing is a lethal, it's a thanatos, it's a death anger, and we have
it's
always
punitive. It's a punitive
exactly and
I don't think all anger has to be punitive.
It doesn't. In fact, a woman who is in labor and is screaming all sorts of things I can't say on air, that are spelled with 4 letters, is not, that's a very different kind of anger, but she's letting it out. So I mean, we're just inventing now, I think, a vocabulary and a repertoire of anger, and I'd love to see women become virtuosos in it, and I think this book goes a long way toward preparing them to do that. So thank you
so much, Robin.
Thank you, Rebecca. Listen to you. Stay out. You're safe out there. The book is called Good and Mad: The Revolutionary Power of Women's Anger, and we've been talking to wonderful Rebecca Traister. You stay safe and just give them hell, Rebecca. Okay?
Thanks so much, Robin. You too.
And now it's time for one last quick break, but I'll be right back after that with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
And welcome back once more to some fighting words. This is a thought experiment, an exercise in imagination. But I need you to really commit to it, as I will, doing it with you. It's not touchy-feely. Imagination is a precious capacity we humans have. Maybe other animals do too, but I know we have it, because all art and creativity and invention comes from it, although too often we use it for petty or even nefarious purposes. But not this time. So concentrate with me and let's really try this seriously together. Imagine you wake up and for the first time in so long feel glad to be awake. It's only now that you suddenly realize how truly miserable you've been, and you thought you'd known that. Imagine you go for a walk, and people are actually smiling at each other on the street. Perfect strangers are grinning and giving each other high fives. There, over there, see that group of old men sitting on a park bench? They're laughing and slapping each other on the back, and look, one is crying with happiness. And there, those roisterous middle-aged women and men pouring out of a bar, companionably, drinks in hand, toasting each other, and toasting passers-by on the street. Over here, too, see? A spontaneous circle dance has broken out, a makeshift combination of a Jewish hora and a Greek stamping circle. And is that a march or a parade? All young women, some of them pregnant, some in full butch array, singing and smiling arm in arm. A pair of young lovers, her wearing kente cloth, him in a business suit. They are kissing, oblivious to everyone else in the world, right in the middle of the street. A truck driver leans down out of his semi-window, shouting, "Someday, huh?" A young guy in a wheelchair spins himself around like an athlete and whoops, "Yee-haw!" And kids everywhere, just let out of school, just running and shoving and hopping and yelling with glee. Oh, look, on the corner, a woman with a classically trained, beautiful voice stands singing to the tune of "I Am Pretty" from West Side Story, but with her own lyrics. Listen. I am silly, I am happy, I am silly and happy and free. Then imagine you hear a roar, a distant roar that strangely isn't frightening even though it is enormous. Then you realize is it cheering? Yes, great cheers going up from London's Trafalgar Square and the Place de la Concorde in Paris and Tiananmen Square in Beijing. From Kremlin Square in Moscow and St. Peter's Square in Rome and Tahrir Square in Cairo and all the Plazas Bolivar across Latin America. This is elation. This lightness you feel is like floating, as if a great flattening, punishing burden has lifted, as if Sisyphus has put the stone down. Relief and energy. It's like being in love. It's so unfamiliar. It's joy. Imagine this, all this. Imagine it's November 7th, and it's dawning on you that we actually won. We won the House of Representatives by a large margin, and we won the Senate, after all, by a slim one, but it's a margin. Don't be superstitious. Don't fear superstition. Say it. We won every governorship up for election, and we won over 25% of all state legislatures, with the numbers still coming in. Imagine the relief. Imagine the lightness. Imagine hope returning. Imagine everything that really matters. The planet, all the creatures that breathe and fly and move and swim and read and write and sing and laugh and love. If we cannot even imagine this anymore, then they will have won, don't you see? So make it a point to imagine this, because imagination must precede reality. It always has and always will. Imagine this feeling of our world having a future. Imagine feeling pride again, because democracy spoke and we were its voice. Now go do what will make that feeling happen. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's our show for today. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheRobinMorgan and on Facebook at facebook.com/TheRobinMorgan. Check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book, Dark Matter, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for our show. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.